Okay, hello everyone, and here we are. We're ready to go for the midterm review to find out what we've been doing or what we've supposed to have been doing. So let's just go ahead and get started. And the first thing you need to know, of course, is when is it? The midterm starts April 30th, and it runs through May 8th. Now, there is a little glitch in the system because, yes, it starts Thursday, but there is no school on Friday. That's the in-service day. And, or I guess that's actually Wednesday it starts. But that's okay because you still get the full 7 days. That's why we're starting early this time. So it starts Wednesday, April 30th, and it will end on Thursday as scheduled the following week, May 8th. So you do have that time to get in and take the test. And it's always best, of course, to consult the testing lab website for the hours of operation. So if you want to know when you can take it, the time, consult their website and it'll give you their hours of operation. And that's what we're talking about right there. It is the Social Science Testing Lab in the center building. It's 456 in the center, and that's where you will take the exam. It is a computer exam, an objective exam. There will be 50 questions. It's worth 100 points. So 50 questions. There will be no written part to the exam. It's all, what I like to say, multiple guess. And the good news is, as I mentioned, Joe, way back when during our orientation session, is that you are allowed one 3x5 note card in the testing center. So, and you can use front and back, but you're only allowed one card. And so don't take in a whole bunch of them because you'll be kicked out. Just go by the rules and take one card with you. Okay. Study guides are now available on Moodle. They'll give you information about what you should know for the exam. It's kind of amplifies a bit, or I'm probably amplifying it, but it's what we're going over tonight, and it's there in written form for you to download and review and say, yeah, I know everything on this, so no problem, I can sleep well tonight. Okay. Also, I want to remind you that you are responsible for your exam, not me. That's you. It is your responsibility to make the exam date and time. And the way you do that is to check that website for their hours of operation. And that is crucial because they do have certain hours when they're open. And it's not going to do you any good if you find out that they close at 5 o'clock and you go in at 5 minutes to 5. It's just not going to happen. So adjust your schedules accordingly. Okay, there'll be no makeup examinations, so don't even bother to ask. And what will be on the exam? It will cover material in the classic Hollywood style, which goes all the way back to week number 1, through what's going on this week, which is the romantic comedy. Essentially, what they have been talking about in the very beginning of this course, they have been talking about what constitutes the American movie industry. And it is constituted of production, distribution, and exhibition. What they're talking about, what that means is simply that it is an industry. It is a big industry in the United States, and what they did at this time, they produced films, they distributed those films and to theaters that exhibited those films. And the Hollywood industry, the Hollywood movie studios controlled all three of those things. Also, what they have been talking about for the last few weeks is the industry's use of genre, that key word there, to minimize financial risk. The sudden discovery of genre, which already had a precedent in books, in dime novels, in the kind of adventure stories and magazines out at the time that produced certain kinds of stories, adventure stories and westerns and that sort of thing. Hollywood just imitated that and began to produce films of the same ilk. And what they discovered was if people like to see one western, they'll like to see a lot of westerns. So they begin to produce what we call genre here, these types of films, and knowing that they're going to get a good return on their investment. So specifically then, we're also looking at the history of the motion picture technology. So be aware of the early projection technology and beware of the notion of persistence of vision. The idea that if you run still images, one after the other, running through a gate in a projector like that, it gives you the illusion of movement. That's what persistence of vision is. As we see those images go by, we see movement. At this time, we have this technology, so recognize the key innovations and individuals involved. Certainly recognize what a kinetoscope is, and certainly understand Edison and his contributions, and Dixon, his contributions. Understand the Nickelodeon era. That is the era of the movie theater, a Nickelodeon that our movies are no longer little gimmicks, parlor games, things that you drop your money in and turn a crank and you see movement in a little viewer, but instead you go to a place that projects an image onto a screen. Understand the MPPC, that's the Motion Picture Patents Company, which was in existence from 1908 through 1915. That is Edison's company, or his hold. It's his hold on the movie industry. That's his stuff. He invented it and he's going to control it. And then as the movies progress and as more and more audiences start going to the movies, we create the movie palace, the huge theater. No longer the little Nickelodeon thing, but instead a huge movie palace. And it kind of establishes for us what the movies are all about. So those are things that you need to know regarding the history of the motion picture. Also, what was discussed intensely here was the way in which cinematic stories are told. And what we have, the 5 notions that were outlined in the video series are right there in front of you. The first one is what they referred to there as equilibrium and disruption. And what is that? That is this, as the book states, an initial state of affairs is introduced after which something occurs to disturb this equilibrium. In other words, what it means is everything is fine in the beginning of our movie. Everything's wonderful. But something happens to disturb that equilibrium. It is thrown out of balance. It is thrown off kilter. Something happens, okay? And then secondly, subsequent events attempt to restore the original status quo. But this is repeatedly frustrated and order is recovered only at the end of the film. You know this by heart. You have been to movies enough and seen television enough that you know that that's essentially what happens in just about every movie that's ever been made, is that things start in a normal way, something happens that disrupts that equilibrium, and then it's our job, that is, in it being involved in the film, watching the film, it is really the hero. It's his job to bring things back into order. Okay, so that's equilibrium and disruption. Also, that narrative style, we are involved in problem solving. And what is that? Well, according to our book, over the course of the narrative, characters struggle to achieve their goals or solve their problems. All right? That's pretty easy. That's pretty straightforward. They overcome those who stand in their way. They triumph over adverse circumstances and or transcend their own limitations. So essentially what it is solving a problem. You know, that's like life. You run into these issues, you run up against a brick wall, and you have to take time to rethink, what am I to do? And this is my problem. I have a brick wall in front of me. I need to get to the other side. What are my options? My options are I can go around it, or I can climb over it, or I can tear it down, or I can do something so that I can get to the other side. It is problem solving. That's what we find in movies. That's what we find in the narrative, that our heroes run up against brick walls constantly. There is one major brick wall that they must get through, but at the same time, they must get through smaller walls in order to get to that big wall. All right, and temporal and spatial limits, what is that? Temporal and spatial limits. All right, the temporal dimension is this. A specific deadline has to be met, or a certain task has to be completed by a definite time. All right, now that can be anything. That can be literally, we have to find the bomb and disarm it before noon. Okay, and right now it is 11:30. So our task, we've got 30 minutes to do it. So that's literally something that we have to deal with. Or it is something that doesn't have exactly a time limit, but it does take us time to get the job done. We might, you know, look, what it is we're leaving St. Louis, Missouri, and we're on our way to Oregon, along the Oregon Trail. How long it takes? Well, that'll be how long it takes. And there will be things in the way. The spatial dimension, characters moving toward precise destinations or geographical goals. Back to our trip to Oregon. It is a long and arduous trip. It's that simple. We're going to have to ford streams, we're going to have to ford rivers, we're going to have to climb mountains, we're going to have to pace ourselves through desert, we're going to have to go through the woods, you know, all that kind of stuff to get there. So Hollywood narrative involves that as well. Okay, what I always find fascination and what I enjoy, because that's part of what I study, is the journey. Because the journey has been, in essence, pretty much that which dominates our driving force in literature, the journey. It stems all the way back. The easiest one to see is, of course, a word that we use when we go on a journey. That's the Odyssey. Okay, so it goes all the way back to that point. So what is it? Well, there are two kinds here that our video series talks about. Within the narrative, we have characters that move not only spatially, but they realize other non-spatial goals as well. They make deadlines, they solve mysteries, they fall in love, they discover new worlds, and coming to terms with themselves and or their fellow travelers. Okay, so in the narratives, we are moving spatially. In many cases, we are. Back to our illustration about on the Oregon Trail. We are moving through space to get to the promised land, as it were. Okay, while doing that, we are also, what? We are reaching deadlines. We are solving problems. We've got a mystery to solve. We fall in love with the woman who's driving the wagon behind us. We're doing all kinds of things like that as well. So that's part of the narrative, is the journey. We embark on a journey. We're going from this place to this place. The second one our series talks about is the audience's journey, and I like what they say, to illustrate that. They always say, what is it about what we do when we talk about the movies? Well, we go to the movies. What we see on the screen is what we are doing at that very moment. We are looking for goals, we are participating in deadlines, and we are undertaking journeys with the characters. We identify with what's going on. In some cases, we identify literally. It may be that I've got the same issue that the character on the screen has. And in other cases, we identify only in a mythic sense, only in a kind of metaphoric sense, in the sense that, no, I'm not on a trip into outer space, but I am on a trip trying to find a new world, trying to find myself in some other place or whatever. All right, moving on. They also make this notation here. They talk about that sense of segmentation versus Aristotle's traditional unities. The dramatic unities, the point number 2 there on your screen, dramatic unities, that's according to Aristotle, action, time, and space. All right, but most films violate the traditional unities and lend themselves to segmentation, which is a process of structural analysis that breaks the film down into its basic narrative units. Going to a film, we can do that. We break things down. For you people who are involved in film production, you know this instinctively. You know that we create a film through and via segments. You know, we shoot scene by scene by scene. We have a shot, we have a scene, we do these things, and then we bring these things together to form a whole. Okay, now moving on. All right, the film techniques and relationship to narrative. Okay, be familiar with these terms right here. Mise en scène. Mise en scène is what you see within the frame. That's everything that you see within that frame, whether it's square, like typical movies in the beginning or at the time we're talking about, or whether it's long, whether it's the wide screen. Whatever is within that frame, that is what mise en scène is. Camera movement and the movement, the techniques of movement. That we move, we can move on the z-axis, which is, dollying, get the camera, and we actually move in to you to get a close-up. It is done 2 ways. We can do that with a dolly, in which the camera literally moves in to get that far away from you, or we use it mechanically with a zoom lens that kind of, there's the difference. I always argue that a dolly shot, actually the camera moves in. It is a sense of moving to you, whereas a zoom pulls you. And also that the camera moves laterally. It moves along the side in what we call dolly shots as well, but we also can call them moving shots, sometimes just a moving camera. But there's that kind of movement. There is also the movement on the axis. That is, of course, panning. We pan left to right, right to left, and then we can also do tilting from lower angles moving up. And then the last one, of course, is the crane, which is sort of a dolly shot in the sky. Lighting. The different types and effects of lighting. Understand 3-point lighting. That's our basic setup for lighting. Sound, the microphones are used. Mixing, scoring, continuity. We have all kinds of sound. We have the live recording of it with a boom microphone that is picking up the live sound. And then we mix all of the sounds, and often what we do is we add things, sound effects, and scoring of music, and how sound helps to create the continuity. Know what a shot is and know the difference between a shot and a scene. The scene, I want to emphasize this part, a scene is the basic dramatic. That's the key word right there. Scene is the basic dramatic unit of what we are seeing, what we are doing. A shot is simply turn the camera on, turn the camera off. Scene editing, between and within scenes. Remember, Hollywood editing is known as invisible editing because we're not aware of it. Scene organization, whether it's linear, circular, whether we use a flashback sequence, like in Citizen Kane, there are multiple flashbacks in a scene. Okay, cross-cutting. Cross-cutting is something that we sort of picked up on. We learned about by going to the movies. Cross-cutting is cutting on the same action. And the easiest way to see that is, of course, the woman that's out there on the railroad tracks, and we cut to the train coming down the tracks. We cut back to the woman on the tracks. Then we cut away to the guy riding the horse, desperately trying to get to rescue the woman. All of those things are happening at the same time. Okay, so that's cross-cutting. Point of view editing, I don't need to do that. You know, point of view is exactly that. Where's the point of view? And the 180-degree rule, that is essentially for filmmakers. Supposedly don't cross the line because it maintains continuity. You just draw a line there, and your camera's over here, and your actors are over here, and you never cross that line in order to maintain continuity. Okay, moving on to the studio system. Motion Picture Patents Company, we already mentioned that. The key players in the creation of the early studio system, there's the big names. William Fox, Carl Laemmle, Louis B. Mayer, Samuel Goldwyn, Marcus Lowe. Those are our big players. Those are the ones who create the studios and essentially create what we call the studio system. The strategies of control. Remember that this is at this time, it is an oligopoly. It is vertical integration. What is that? That is what we talked about earlier. That is the production, distribution, and exhibition. They control everything about movies. They also control things through blind booking and block booking, have an understanding of those, and also they talk about this in the series, the runs, the zones, and the clearances. And then a major thing occurs in 1915, the Sherman antitrust ruling against Edison's company, which then says, okay, anybody can make movies with cameras. You don't have to get them from Edison. Understand and know the importance of the 5 major studios. They are Paramount Pictures, Lowe's Incorporated, which is MGM, Fox, which becomes 20th Century Fox, Warner Brothers, and RKO Radio Pictures. And in their fighting is you'll find the 3 minors there, Universal, Columbia, and United Artists. Also in there, you'll find the low-budget filmmakers, which are known as Poverty Row. Republic, Monogram, Grand National, PRC, Eagle Lion, Allied Artists, and later in the 50s, American International. The Department of Justice case in 1948, which says, okay, you guys can't do this anymore. You can't control all 3 of those. You can't produce them, distribute them, and exhibit them. You got to get rid of one of them, and they all get rid of the theaters. They know where the power is. We produce them, and we control the distribution. Remember, that's how you're always successful, is, you know, even the mafia knows that. That's the control of the, you know, distribution. And so they get rid of the theaters. The effects of breakup on current film production is really easy. The studios are more or less bankers. The studios allow independent producers to make the films. The average cost of film production over time, which is, we all know that, the difference between $1 million movie in 1925 versus $1 million movie today. Rise of film artisans, independent film producers, old studios, essentially what I said earlier, are now financiers, distributors of independently made films. The star. Stars have masks or personas created by film studios. Okay, we have this weird thing that develops, the star. So this is the person that suddenly we see a personality on the screen and we like that personality. And blacks and other minority stars, for example, they talk about Sidney Poitier, breaking the black barrier, as it were, and then the crazy blaxploitation movies of the 70s, crazy movies that were made at that time. Since the breakup of studio systems, stars can make it via other media, for example, music and television, and often they begin over there. They begin in music or whatever and then become motion picture stars. And then we move on to the significance of the genre. This is the ability to categorize movies. Familiarity is what's so crucial here. Genre serves to stabilize an otherwise unstable movie industry. Each new film banks on a number of familiar elements, motifs, and themes, but in a new way. The easiest way to think about it is theme and variation, if you're involved in music. You know, it's the same theme, only it's varied. And, of course, the Western. We go through the Western, which is distinctly an American genre. It is based on dime novels and real-life characters. The three essential ingredients, the hero, the villain, and the landscape. The wide-open spaces of the Wild West. Symbolism, it's East meets West, fact meets fiction, culture versus nature, culture conflict, blah, blah. They talked about that. Yeah, you can figure that out. And then finally, the last of the Westerns, the final frontier, is in space films. Outer space movies just basically are Westerns, only they're set in outer space. Okay, the American comedy, the comic expression of social repression. The themes of American comedy, racism, social integration, comic disintegration and disorder, containing chaos, class and democracy, all of these things were mentioned. Understand and recognize these popular types. Okay, comedy comes through mostly through personality, and in the silent era, it is slapstick and the kinds of slapstick that is given to us by these personalities, Chaplin and Keaton. Understand their contributions. Chaplin and Keaton really defined for us the slapstick of the silent era. Then as sound comes along, the slapstick often gives way to verbal wit. This is marked by Laurel and Hardy, who come out of silent movies and do a fantastic job in that transition, and the arrival of the Marx Brothers. Romantic and screwball comedy. It's a hybrid of romantic and slapstick. Comedies following screwball are these. The thesis comedies, they mentioned them, the black and dark comedy, animal raunchy comedy, animal in the sense of Animal House, which leads the way for the raunchy type comedy, and then the family comedy. Okay, we're at the end of it. Confused, bewildered, rattled, depressed, and desperate. If you are, stop by during office hours or send me an email, and I'll try to confuse you even more. And what else? The study guide is now available, and it's available on Moodle. You can download it. And just remember, there's no makeup exams. Take the exam during that week, this beginning on Wednesday, and you are responsible to, you got to take it at the end there. Now, for those people here in the studio, questions? I have to say that again. Is the study guide going to be exactly like slide for slide, what you just covered? Pretty much, yes, okay. Yes. The question was, is the study guide what I just essentially talked about? And yeah, it's going to bore you just like tonight. Yes, same thing. Other questions? Okay, seeing no questions, we can leave early, or I can stand up here and do a song and dance for a while. All right, see you. Thanks.
Lane Online. Learn, unlearn, relearn.